Welcome back. August 1st, Minnesota was set to become the first state in the nation to ban prediction markets. But just yesterday, a federal judge blocked the state from enforcing the new law. Here to talk about what it all means is Ryan Butler, senior news analyst for Covers.com. Ryan, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, happy to be back on.
So a couple days ago, we were talking to you about this law. Things were up in the air. Now we know there's a preliminary injunction. Update us on what has happened.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I would say for viewers right now to be aware of is that prediction markets will be allowed to continue operations as normal going forward. So if you have a Kalshi, Polymarket, any of these prediction market apps, they're going to continue to work through what might have been a state law that would have banned these from happening, from operating in Minnesota beginning on Saturday, August 1st. So what happened was a Minnesota District Court judge ruled in favor of the prediction markets that had sued to stop this bill within 24 hours after it was signed into law in May. They sided with it, and for a couple of reasons. One of the big ones was that she determined that long term, that the ruling, a future appellate judge, maybe even the Supreme Court, may rule in the prediction market's favor. And the second big factor was they thought there would be irreparable harm caused by this shutdown as we're awaiting further clarification from appellate's courts. So a lot of things moving on with it. But again, I cannot stress enough that for the viewers, if you are a user, you'll be allowed to continue using these platforms in Minnesota for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so you'll be able to continue using these until this lawsuit is wrapped up. Is that what I'm hearing?
Which, again, could be years from now, honestly, until we get the Supreme Court. So it's at minimum going to take months before we have further appeals. This is, again, a legal term, preliminary injunction. This was Kalshi and Polymarket's way of stopping this law from coming into effect as we have more time to try to digest it, look through it. And as everyone knows with the court system, it is never a quick process. So, I mean, we're looking the quickest turnaround would be months from now, and we're potentially looking at years from now if the court ruling is paused, or if there's other injunctions, if there's other motions, if there's any of the other legal maneuvers that could go on. This could be a years-long battle. So again, for now, what you have to look at is that you will be able to continue using these platforms. Again, the best way to put it is for the foreseeable future.
Well, I'm curious then, and I don't know if you have these stats yet, but if you saw a spike in signups or trading volume once this news broke that the ban will not be going into place.
So it's hard to get that at the granular level, at the state specific level, like Minnesota, if there was a big impact on it, and that the information isn't necessarily disclosed publicly. I will say what's interesting is that in the court filing, Kalshi, which is the largest prediction market operator right now, said that there are 90,000 Minnesotans that have used or have active valid accounts right now, which is about 1 out of 65 people in the state, which is an interesting way of looking at it. So there was absolutely an interest there where we're closing in on 100,000 users with that. And then with them, they had traded millions of dollars of contracts that were outstanding. So it's both, it depends on how you slice it. But if you look at close to 100,000 users, that is both a small number, but also a big number. And so we can see that. And in the meantime, users in Minnesota will be allowed to continue signing up. Again, it is based off your physical location, not your state of residency. So anyone who is in Minnesota will be able to use these. Again, the big thing with it, and kind of what ties all with it, Minnesota is one of only 11 states left that has no form of legal sports betting. Much of the criticism from state regulators in Minnesota and elsewhere is that these operate as an illegal form of sports betting. The trades on the Minnesota sports teams, on any sports team, will be allowed to continue again for the foreseeable future on these big prediction market platforms.
Do you predict that this legal fight will discourage other states who were maybe considering tackling a ban?
Yeah, states obviously operate independently, so they all have to go their own way. We're seeing other states right now have thought about introducing legislation just these last couple of weeks about maybe taxing or regulating them. So again, every state is different, but it definitely would not encourage me if I am a state lawmaker in any other state. They do tend to look at what's going on in other states, and I would not say this helps. Now, would this end any further legislative efforts? Absolutely not. But again, it's just one more battlefront, one more thing we look at on this ongoing complex issue about prediction markets, where Minnesota has been at the forefront of it by passing this law. And now the fact that another court has ruled in the prediction markets' favor. If I'm the prediction markets, I'm undoubtedly encouraged by this result.
Yeah, certainly. How does this ruling then shape the boundary between federal oversight and a state's rights to regulate its gambling laws?
Yep, and that is the fundamental question, and that's why this bill was signed into law in May. There was a hearing in July. It's just not enough time to try to wrestle with this issue. We're seeing in other courts in New Jersey, courts and appellate courts in San Francisco, courts all over the country are wrestling with this question. And this is why I've said on this show, and I'll say elsewhere, ultimately it looks like people on both sides, the state regulators who believe in states' rights, and the federal government, where the federal government does have supreme authority, both argue and both believe that this is heading towards the Supreme Court. A ruling could come about a year from now. It could come 2 years from now. But because of the complexity of this issue, because it does involve a huge, delicate, difficult question between states' rights and the federal government's rights, this is why it's probably heading there. And again, we've seen how long it will take just at the state level to get these things resolved. The Supreme Court moves even more slowly in most cases. So it could be a long time coming. But again, a really interesting, just from a purely legal perspective, it's a very interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm also curious if these prediction market platforms maybe will be putting more funding into their lobbying efforts, especially in these states that they think might be considering something like this. Do you predict that they'll be increasing their lobbying efforts in those states?
Yeah, lobbying is absolutely part of this process. They don't want to see any more state laws going for it. They actually honestly don't want any state laws at all because they continue to argue that it's for the federal government. If I was the prediction markets, any lobbying dollars for his lawmakers would probably go to the Congress for maybe a favorable law there, but it seems unlikely that Congress is going to act, even though Congress has introduced several pieces of legislation that could impact prediction markets. Really, all efforts right now are going into the courts. So this is ultimately going to be the deciding factor. Even if all 50 states pass laws regulating, banning, taxing, whatever they want to do with prediction markets. And even if Congress, even less unlikely, passed a law that in some way regulated them, it would still go to the Supreme Court. And so that's where I think all attention needs to be focused on. Minnesota's was a very interesting test case. It was a sign of kind of the idea of states' rights versus the federal government, like we talked about. Right now, it is a small victory for the prediction markets, but it's still just part of a very large battle that ultimately we think is going to have to be determined by the Supreme Court.
Can't users get around the ban even if it did go into a place? Can't they get around it by using a VPN?
So yes, technically that would be illegal. That would be in
Right.
violation if that had gone into effect. We've seen this in Nevada where it wasn't a ban, but a court there has ruled in favor of Nevada regulators, saying that Kalshi, Polymarket have to cease operations. We call it geofencing technology, which is used actually by sports books, used by a lot of companies. It's used on your phone. It's really a fascinating technology that looks and can track all of this very accurately. So that would have gone into effect. If you were to use a VPN, that would be against the law. And I would absolutely not have recommended that for anyone to try to do.
All right. Very interesting. Ryan Butler, Senior News Analyst for Covers.com. Thanks for coming back on the show.
As always, happy to be here.
Yep. All right.